The grand convocation hall of Verelion Prime was built to humble. Its ceiling rose like a cathedral of silver and light, filled with gravity conduits that shimmered faintly, pressing the air downward in a subtle, deliberate weight. The architects had designed it so that every being who entered instinctively bowed, a silent submission encoded into physics itself. When the human entered, she didn't bow. Lyra Vance stepped through the archway as if she belonged there. The hall's blue illumination rippled across the metal of her uniform. Plain black fabric, no adornments, no medals. Behind her, two alien ushers hesitated, uncertain whether to follow or retreat. Every eye turned toward her, hundreds of species. Thousands of dignitaries seated in concentric tiers, their faces reflecting every shade of shock, curiosity, or disdain. The announcement echoed, "Representative of Terra, envoy Lyra Vance." For a heartbeat, silence consumed the hall. Then came a murmur, the sound of disapproval in 100 different tongues. She kept walking. The gravity field thickened around her ankles, testing her stride. Many civilizations would collapse to their knees under that force. Humans were not most civilizations. Lyra's breathing slowed, her steps measured, her posture unbroken. At the far end of the hall, Archon Vetal waited on the dais. Tall, scaled, elegant in his ceremonial robes of blue and obsidian. His crest glimmered faintly as he watched her. "So," he said, voice resonating through the chamber's amplifiers. "The Deathworld sends a child." His words were sharp and deliberate, meant to draw laughter. They succeeded. The hall trembled with low, scornful amusement. Lyra's gaze didn't shift. "Earth sends a representative," she said evenly. "My age isn't relevant to truth." Her voice carried strangely well. Human tone patterns struck some frequencies the chamber's acoustic filters didn't dampen. The result was unsettlingly clear, every syllable vibrating just above the normal hearing range of most species. Vital smiled faintly, showing rows of teeth. "Truth," he repeated. "We are here to determine whether your world understands the meaning of civilization. Deathworlds produce survivors, not diplomats." Lyra stopped at the edge of the central circle. The gravity nexus. The invisible field there was designed to crush pride. Delegates who entered it sank to one knee automatically, their bodies unable to resist the engineered pressure. Lyra stepped forward. The field recognized a new mass and adjusted instantly, multiplying its weight several-fold. Vetal leaned forward slightly, anticipating her fall. The crowd murmured, some pitying, others amused. She didn't move. Her spine straightened. The soles of her boots creaked softly. The pressure was immense, like standing on the surface of Jupiter, but her training on Deathworld Delta 4 had taught her how to use her own body as counterbalance, how to shift her breathing to absorb stress instead of fight it. She looked up at the Archon. "You designed this hall to make everyone kneel," she said softly. "Interesting choice for a democracy." Gasps rippled through the audience. Vital's smile faltered. "Kneeling," he said, "is respect." "Respect is earned," she replied. "Kneeling is habit." For the first time in decades, the chamber's silence wasn't due to ceremony. It was due to shock. The gravity field shimmered faintly around her, light bending slightly as her own biofield resisted the pressure. Vital stood, his crest rising in agitation. "You mock our traditions before the eyes of the Accord?" Lyra's gaze met his without blinking. "No, I challenge them." "There's a difference." The Archon's voice dropped to a low hiss. "Do you know where you stand, human?" "In the same place my species always stands," she said, "on our own 2 feet." The translators hesitated to interpret her words. They carried more than defiance. There was something primal in her tone, a calm certainty that cut through layers of protocol. In the upper tiers, a winged delegate whispered to another, "She resists the field." The other replied, "Impossible." But the readings on their sensors showed it. The human's skeletal density, muscle fiber resistance, and oxygen efficiency made her a walking anomaly. Vital motioned to the control steward. "Increase the field," he commanded. The pressure intensified. The air itself grew dense enough to hum. Even Vital's own aides bent forward slightly, straining to stay upright. Lyra exhaled slowly, Her eyes flicked toward the ceiling's reflection dome. "Do you know what gravity does on a death world?" she asked quietly. "It breaks bones, tears ligaments, crushes lungs. We learn to stand under it." Her words weren't loud, yet they reached every corner of the hall. Vital's claws dug into the railing. "You stand only because we allow it." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "Then stop allowing it," he froze. He could not. Any more increase risked collapsing the field entirely. Everyone knew it. The human smiled faintly. "We kneel only for our dead," she said. The hall erupted. Shouts in alien dialects, a dozen languages overlapping in disbelief. Some called it insolence. Others called it courage. Vital's aides tried to restore order. But the chamber had become a storm. Through it all, Lyra remained motionless. Calm. Anchored. The gravity field still shimmered around her boots, but her body no longer trembled. Vital finally raised a clawed hand, voice thundering, "Enough!" The amplifiers quaked. Silence followed. He looked down at her, scales dim under the white light. "You are young," he said more quietly now. "Arrogance is a human flaw. You would do well to learn humility before this council decides your species' fate." Lyra looked up, unflinching. "Then teach me," she said, "if you can." A murmur passed through the delegates again, different this time, uncertain. Vital's crest pulsed once, then folded back. "Very well," he said. "Tomorrow the council convenes. You will speak for your kind, if you are still standing." "I intend to be," she said. As the escort drones descended to guide her out, Lyra turned her gaze briefly toward the spectators. Rows of alien eyes stared back, some hostile, some intrigued. A few, surprisingly, respectful. When she exited the hall, the gravity field recalibrated, and hundreds of dignitaries found themselves rising involuntarily from half-bows they hadn't realized they'd made. The air felt lighter, but the silence remained heavy. Vital watched the doorway close behind her. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, but an unease he couldn't name. He looked down at the dais controls. The gravity readings flickered uncertainly. The field had destabilized when she left, as though the system itself had hesitated to enforce obedience. Across the galaxy, the footage of that moment, one human standing unbowed in the heart of the Accord, began circulating through the data webs before the meeting even ended. It would be called later. The moment of standing, but for now. In the echoing vastness of the convocation hall, the only truth that mattered was simple. The Deathworld girl had not bowed. And the galaxy had noticed. The meeting chamber of the Galactic Accord was smaller than the convocation hall, but colder. Its walls were smooth crystal, its air unnaturally sterile. The long oval table at its center pulsed faintly with embedded biolights, reacting to each heartbeat around it. 10 representatives sat there, leaders of species older than Earth's recorded history, and one human. Lyra Vance sat alone at the far end. Her palms rested flat on the table's cool surface. Every movement, every breath was calculated. She knew they expected emotion. They wanted the Deathworld girl to flinch. She didn't. Archon Vital entered with deliberate grace, robes whispering against the floor. He dismissed his aides with a flick of his clawed hand and stopped across from her. "Ambassador," he said smoothly, "your performance yesterday caused considerable disturbance." Lyra's tone was neutral. "I wasn't performing." He studied her face, unblinking, unreadable. "You must understand, the Accord is not a battlefield. It functions through ceremony and respect." "I respected your ceremony," she replied, "until it demanded submission." His jaw flexed slightly, the scaled ridges along his temples tightening. "You mistake cooperation for subservience. Humanity's aggression has always been its weakness. You conquered your own planet with fire before you ever built ships." Lyra leaned forward slightly. "You speak as if your species grew out of peace. The Varelians didn't unite through dialogue. They burned half their continents first. That landed like a blade across his pride." You presume to lecture me on history? I studied it, she said. All of it. The Accord archives aren't sealed from Earth anymore. We know how your empires formed, how your treaties began with wars no one wants to remember. Her voice was even, but every word struck with precision. The other delegates exchanged subtle glances. The human wasn't intimidated. She was dissecting him. Vital drew closer, his eyes narrowing. Do you think defiance earns respect? I think truth does. He circled her slowly, studying her posture like a predator gauging distance. You have courage, he admitted, but courage without place becomes arrogance. The Accord's order has preserved stability for millennia. Your species threatens that balance. Lyra didn't turn to face him. Balance built on fear isn't order, it's stagnation. He stopped behind her chair. You are very young, human. Youth mistakes defiance for strength. The universe has claws sharper than yours. Lyra's reflection in the crystal wall met his gaze indirectly. We grew up surrounded by claws. That's how we learned to sharpen ours. The room's atmosphere thickened, not through the gravity field, but through tension. Vital moved back to his seat. His tone softened, deceptively patient. Let me tell you something of my species, Lyra Vance. On Verelion, when a youngling bares its fangs too early, the elders dull them. Not to harm, but to teach restraint. A blade without control cuts its own hand. Lyra folded her hands. And what happens when the elders are the ones drawing blood? He blinked once. Then civilization ends. Or begins again, she said quietly. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was evaluation. Several delegates tilted their heads, observing the exchange as if witnessing the emergence of a new variable in an old equation. Vital's eyes glowed faintly gold. I have met human soldiers, he said. They are efficient, brutal, and fearless. I respect that in the arena of death. But you? You speak like a scholar pretending to be a predator. Lyra met his stare. You're wrong. I'm a predator who learned how to speak. His crest twitched, amusement mixing with unease. You intend to intimidate me? I don't need to, she said. You already tightened your claws. He looked down, noticing his talons had unconsciously dug small scratches into the table's surface. A few alien aides pretended not to notice. Vital exhaled slowly. Very well, Deathworlder. You wish to prove that humanity belongs here. Tomorrow, before the full council, you will present your case for membership. But understand this. Every word you say will be dissected. Every pause will be judged. Fail, and your world remains an outsider forever. Lyra nodded once. Then I won't fail. He rose, towering above her. Confidence is admirable, but remember, confidence doesn't stop gravity. She stood as well, matching his height in defiance, if not in stature. No, she said, but it changes how you fall. For a moment, Vital almost smiled. Then the mask of authority returned. Dismissed. Lyra left the chamber without waiting for the guards to escort her. Outside, the corridors of the Accord Citadel were alive with motion. Drones, envoys, news feeds pulsing across transparent walls. Her image was everywhere. The human who stood. Every step she took, she felt the stares. Some curious, some reverent, some filled with loathing. She ignored them all until a smaller figure approached. A Finari delegate with translucent skin and soft amber eyes. Envoy Vance, the being said softly. I watched the broadcast. You made the Archon hesitate. Lyra stopped. He'll recover. Perhaps, the Finari said. But many of us noticed something he didn't. The gravity field. It faltered when you refused to kneel. Lyra tilted her head. Malfunction? No. Resonance, the delegate said. The Hall system reacts to bioelectric frequencies. It responded to yours. So it adapted, Lyra said. The Fenari's expression turned contemplative. No. It yielded. The alien bowed slightly and drifted away into the corridor light, leaving Lyra with the echo of that word. She reached her quarters, a minimalist chamber overlooking the endless silver spires of Verelion Prime. Her reflection in the viewport looked back with a calm she didn't fully feel. Earth's message replayed in her mind, the last instruction from the Terran Council before departure. Earn respect. Don't start wars. Respect was proving harder than war ever had. She activated the comm pad on her wrist. It projected a silent hologram of her father, recorded years ago before his death. He'd been a survival instructor, lean and sunburned with that same unyielding gaze. Remember, Lyra, his voice said, strength isn't what you show when people watch. It's what you hold when no one believes you can. She closed the projection gently. The city lights reflected off her eyes like twin stars. The next day would decide everything, not just Earth's acceptance, but humanity's place in the galaxy. And though she felt the weight of the coming confrontation, she smiled faintly. Because she'd already learned something Vital hadn't. Predators don't roar to prove power. They let silence do it for them. Across the Accord network, the hollow stream from the meeting chamber was already being replayed millions of times. In colonies where the Accord's authority had long gone unquestioned, whispers began. The human didn't bow. The Archon flinched. By the time Lyra lay down to rest, those whispers had become signals, quiet messages between worlds. The lesson she'd begun to teach was spreading faster than the Council could contain, and somewhere deep within the Accord's archives, an old algorithm, one designed to monitor threat anomalies, triggered an alert. The parameters matched only one entry: Deathworld level cognitive defiance, human variant. Lyra Vance closed her eyes. Tomorrow the real war would begin, not with weapons, but with words sharp enough to leave scars. The convocation hall was overflowing. Holofeeds broadcasted the session across thousands of systems. Every species that once ignored Earth now tuned in, waiting to see if the Deathworld envoy would kneel or burn. Lyra Vance stood alone at the center of the hall once more. This time there was no curiosity in the crowd, only judgment. The Archon's crest gleamed like a drawn blade under the blue light. Today, Vital announced, we decide whether Terra is fit to stand among the civilized. His voice carried authority sharpened by centuries of politics. Yesterday, this human mocked our traditions. Now she will learn humility or leave this chamber in disgrace. Lyra let the words wash over her. She could feel the gravity field hum beneath her boots, coiled and waiting like a predator. The same force that once tried to break her now felt almost familiar. She met the Archon's gaze. Permission to speak for Earth, Vital gestured. Speak, and may the galaxy witness your fall. She activated her wrist console. A cascade of holographic symbols flared above her, ancient data seals from the Accord archives. The hall shifted uneasily as the images resolved into blueprints, timestamps, and forgotten signatures. I've reviewed your founding records, she began. Her voice was calm, measured, not defiant but surgical. According to these archives, the energy lattice that powers your planetary networks wasn't designed by Verelion engineers. It was Terran. Laughter rippled through the crowd, short, nervous, forced. Vital smiled thinly. Impossible. Earth was in chaos when the Accord formed. Lyra zoomed the projection closer. The schematic rotated, displaying the creator's tagline, encoded in Old Earth Standard. Prototype source, Project Horizon, Terra, 2216 CE. The chamber stilled. Delegates leaned forward. Vital's eyes flicked across the data, his expression tightening. This is fabrication, he said. Human trickery. Lyra didn't look away. Your own archives verified it. You built your civilization's core from stolen human technology. salvaged from a derelict probe we lost beyond Sol centuries ago. You called it the Accord engine. A low murmur rolled through the assembly. Every delegate could feel the shift, the first crack in a perfect facade. Lyra stepped closer to the dais. You've preached order while feeding on what we left behind. You fear us because you remember the truth. You didn't create the light that powers your cities. You borrowed it. Vital slammed his claw on the console, trying to override the hologram. It refused to vanish. Remove this human, he barked. Guards moved, but hesitated. Lyra's tone cut through the noise. The Accord claims to represent unity, yet you built it on stolen fire and called it peace. Her words echoed, amplified through the chamber. Even the drones paused midair, unable to process the shifting hierarchy. Vital's voice lowered to a growl. You come into my hall and accuse us of theft? I come into your hall, she said, and remind you of debt. He rose, towering over her. You think a single data file will change millennia of order? You are a child standing before an empire. Lyra looked up steadily. Empires fall when children stop being afraid. Gasps fluttered through the tears. The Archon's crest flared, a physical signal of fury. You will bow, he said coldly, or Earth will be erased from every map in this chamber. Lyra tilted her head slightly. Then do it. Show them what your civilization truly is. For several seconds, the hall trembled in silence. No one moved. Even Vital hesitated, his threat hanging heavy but hollow. His voice cracked slightly when he spoke again. You test the limits of mercy, human. Lyra deactivated the hologram. Mercy is for equals. You offered none to us. She turned and placed her hand on the dais seal, a massive sigil that governed the Accord's authority. It shimmered under her touch, scanning her biosignature. The hall gasped as the seal's light turned from blue to white. The system was recognizing her access. That shouldn't have been possible. Lyra's voice remained calm. Your founders embedded a failsafe in this system, coded to the DNA of the original designers. Human DNA. A beam of light cascaded up from the dais, forming the emblem of Earth across the ceiling. The system spoke in a synthesized voice that hadn't been heard for centuries. Primary access verified. Protocol Terra reinstated. The hall erupted in chaos. Some shouted in disbelief, others in awe. The very structure of the Accord recognized humanity as part of its foundation. Vital's voice cut through the storm. Deactivate it! He roared, slamming commands into his console. Nothing responded. Lyra looked at him quietly. It's over, Archon. The system remembers who built it. He stepped down from the dais, claws glinting. You've doomed yourself. You think one truth makes you powerful? Power is control. No, she said. Power is choice. He lunged forward, trying to seize her wrist. The moment his hand touched her arm, the dais flared again. The gravity field inverted. The Archon staggered, his body forced downward by a surge of gravitational feedback. The chamber lights flickered. Every delegate froze as Vital collapsed to one knee, pinned under his own system. Lyra didn't move. Her voice was low, but it carried to the highest tier. You said kneeling is respect. Then perhaps it's time the Accord showed some. No one spoke. No one dared. The gravity pulse faded, but Vital remained kneeling, his crest dimmed in humiliation. Lyra turned to the delegates. Humanity came here to join you, not to rule you. But we will not bow for acceptance. We will stand for it. The chamber's amplifiers caught every syllable. Her words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. All across the tiers, alien representatives looked at each other, some uncertain, others inspired. The moment had transcended politics. It was no longer a debate. It was history being rewritten. Vital forced himself upright, trembling with restrained rage. You've made enemies you can't imagine, human. Lyra's gaze met his. You already imagined us, she said. That's why you feared us? She stepped away from the dais, the Accord seal glowing brighter in her wake. The hall's great doors opened silently, and she walked out as the assembly remained frozen in place. Outside, the sunlight of Verelion Prime cut through the silver towers. She paused at the edge of the marble platform overlooking the city. The horizon shimmered with energy lines, the same network powered by that ancient Terran technology. For the first time in centuries, it acknowledged its creators. Behind her, distant voices rose, some calling for reform, others shouting defiance. The galaxy was splitting between fear and respect, exactly as she knew it would. Lyra looked up at the sky, whispering to herself, "We didn't come here to start wars. But if truth is a weapon, then let it cut clean." The wind carried her words into the city below. By nightfall, every broadcast across the Accord would carry the same image. The Deathworld girl walking away from the hall, unarmed, unbowed, and unchallenged, while the Archon of Verelion remained kneeling behind her. It was the day the galaxy learned that Earth didn't conquer with armies. It conquered with gravity itself choosing to bow. The days after the convocation split the galaxy open. Entire networks buzzed with one image, a human standing while the Archon of Verelion knelt. It spread faster than any sanctioned broadcast, replicated, encrypted, whispered between colonies that had never dared question the Accord's authority. Lyra Vance didn't celebrate. She watched the ripples form from the quiet of her quarters, sleepless beneath the pale light of Verelion's twin moons. Each message flashing across the hollow feed was another spark she couldn't control. The humans showed the truth. If they can defy the Archon, why can't we? The Terran Council's encrypted transmission arrived before dawn. The familiar sigil shimmered above her desk, followed by a man's composed voice. "Envoy Vance, this is Director Holt. You've exceeded expectations and ignited consequences beyond our projection. The Accord is fracturing. We need you to stabilize it before open rebellion begins." Lyra stared at the message, jaw tight. "They wanted respect," she murmured, "and they got fear instead." Her console pulsed again, an incoming request from the Accord security chamber. Summons Archon Vital, immediate audience. For a moment she considered refusing. Then she stood fastening the black clasp of her uniform. "Let's end this properly." The chamber was smaller than before, personal, sealed from outside observers. Vital waited alone, his crest dim under the neutral light. Gone were the ceremonial robes. He wore a plain tunic, the attire of one stripped of display. When Lyra entered, he didn't rise. "I wondered if you would come," he said quietly. "I'm surprised you asked," she replied. He gestured toward the seat across from him. "Sit, human." She remained standing. "You preferred me that way last time." A faint rasp passed through his throat, a sound that might have been laughter. "The galaxy calls you savior. You've undone centuries of order in one act." "I didn't undo it," Lyra said. It was already hollow. He leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Do you think chaos brings freedom? Civilizations aren't built by truth alone. They're built by control." "Control built on lies collapses the moment light hits it," she said evenly. "You saw that." Vital studied her for a long silence. "I saw a creature raised by gravity itself stand against the weight of empire. Do you know what that makes you, Lyra Vance?" She met his gaze. "A reminder, or a weapon," she shook her head. "Weapons destroy. Reminders endure." The Archon rose slowly, his joints clicking faintly. "You exposed me before the galaxy. My authority is ash, yet I can't hate you. I should. But I can't. Because you saw what we really are," Lyra said. "Not monsters. Not savages. Just people who stopped kneeling a long time ago." He walked to the viewing pane overlooking the capital. The city shimmered beneath the storm barrier, lines of energy still pulsing with the faint resonance of the Terran code she'd reactivated. "Do you know what happens now?" he asked. "Reform," she said. "Civil war," he corrected softly. "Half the council demands your arrest. The other half wants to invite humanity into leadership. They all forget one thing. You lit a fire that won't go out when you leave." Lyra crossed her arms. "Then I'll stay long enough to make sure it burns clean." He turned toward her, the faint gleam of admiration in his reptilian eyes. "You would risk your life to fix what you broke?" "I didn't break it," she said. "I exposed it. If truth causes collapse, maybe the structure deserved it." For the first time since their confrontation, the Archon smiled genuinely. "You sound like the founders I once admired." "Maybe that's the point," she said. "We came here to remind you of what you once were." The room's silence deepened. Then Vital reached into his sleeve and withdrew a crystal data shard, placing it on the table. "This contains every sealed record of the Accord's founding, proof of what you uncovered, and more. I won't survive long enough to use it." "You will," Lyra hesitated. "Why give this to me?" "Because," he said, "I would rather history remember that I helped you rebuild it than die pretending it was never broken." Their eyes met, predator to predator, neither superior nor submissive. The unspoken acknowledgement between them carried more meaning than any treaty. Lyra picked up the shard. "What about you?" He looked back toward the city. "I'll face them. They'll need a villain to hate. I'm suited for that role." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Order demands sacrifice." Her fingers tightened around the shard. "Then I'll make sure your sacrifice isn't rewritten." He inclined his head once. "Then perhaps we understand each other at last." Hours later, the council reconvened in chaos. Delegates shouted over each other, some demanding humanity's exile, others calling for reform under Terran guidance. Lyra walked straight into the center of the storm. The hall recognized her authority now. The dais lights followed her automatically. Without ceremony, she projected the data shard's contents into the air. The holograms painted the ceiling with history. Founders, early species, Earth's forgotten probes, and the Accord's original oaths. Equality, cooperation, unity. "Look at what you were meant to be," she said, her voice carrying calm through the uproar. "You built this alliance to escape tyranny, not recreate it. Humanity didn't come here to rule. We came to remind you of your own promise." A quiet spread through the tears like an incoming tide. The words were simple, but something in her tone disarmed them. The absence of hatred, the presence of resolve. "Vital will answer for his actions," she continued, "but not as a symbol of destruction. He was part of a system that lost its purpose. All of you were. So were we." The crowd shifted, uncertain. One delegate, a slender being from the Lysari Confederacy, rose. "And what of you, human? What do you seek now?" Lyra's eyes swept the hall. "Balance. Not through fear. Through memory. Let every world stand on its own feet again." Silence. Then applause. Hesitant, then growing, spreading across species that had never agreed on anything in living memory. Lyra stepped back, the projection fading. The vote passed before the session ended. Earth granted full membership. The Accord restructured under shared governance. She left the chamber quietly while history rewrote itself behind her. Outside, dawn broke over Virelion. The air felt lighter than before, as if the planet itself had exhaled. She stood at the balcony edge, watching the light spread across the towers, a voice behind her, familiar, calm, distant. "You've changed everything." She turned. The Finari delegate stood there, translucent skin glowing softly. "Not everything," Lyra said. "Just enough." The alien tilted its head. "And Earth? What will your people do now that they are seen?" Lyra smiled faintly. "Stand. The rest will follow." She turned her gaze to the horizon, where ships ascended through the morning haze, Terran vessels rising side by side with alien craft for the first time in history. The galaxy hadn't bowed. It had risen, and somewhere deep beneath the surface of Virelion Prime, the Accord's core systems pulsed in silent acknowledgement. The Terran code integrated once more, not as domination, but as memory. Lyra breathed in the alien air, her reflection merging with the dawnlight on the glass. The Deathworld girl refused to bow. Now, the stars themselves seemed to be learning how to stand.